We are at the tipping point of some very intense global and personal changes that we haven't seen in hundreds of years. Now, these energies, the energy of the planet Neptune, which is our planet that can be connected to ideology as well as confusion and fog, spirituality, and sometimes a lack of control or a lack of boundaries. This planet has been moving through Pisces since 2011 for you. Now, have a think about the house in your chart that has got Pisces on the cusp of it, because this house has been kind of under a spell from Neptune. Now, there might have been more idealism in relation to the topics of this house. You might have had rose-colored glasses on. You might have had unrealistic expectations or a sense of fog or a difficulty with managing the topics of that house. Now, that house is about to get a break because we're going to have Neptune going into Aries. So check the Aries house of your chart to see the influence because this is going to be a long transit. Neptune is going to move through Aries and it's not going to complete that transit till 2039. Now, we did have a little bit of a sample. Neptune has dipped its head into Pisces from March through to October 2025. And we saw an intensification of political events. The movement of Neptune out of Pisces and into Aries is changing the temperature of things globally. Pisces is a cold, wet water sign, and Neptune has got that sort of nebulous, almost like fluid energy. So when it was in Pisces, back in that period since 2011, in terms of society, we saw an expansion of things like some of these Piscean ideologies. There was a growth in spiritual teachers, plant medicines, self-care in terms of counseling and, having these mental health plans, as well as the explosion of global health crises connected to addiction. So we saw the fentanyl crisis. We've also seen the opioid crisis. Now, Pisces has got connection to substances and to a lack of boundaries. So with Neptune going through Pisces, we can see these themes have definitely been highlighted in that period. Now, with Neptune leaving Pisces and moving into Aries, we see an addition of heat. We see some of these Neptune sort of ideologies starting to creep into a sense of being more individualistic. So, like Neptune in Pisces is more about the collective. Okay, it's more about the society or like what can we do in more of a group setting. But when we go into Aries, it becomes more about what is my individual ideology? What am I going to fight for? So we will have to be mindful of um, sort of a bit of a global sense of delusion around what is and isn't worth fighting for. So now, Neptune isn't going to be on its own through Aries. Shortly after Neptune enters into Aries, so that's going to happen in 3 days' time on the 27th of January. By the beginning of Feb, we're going to see Saturn leaving Pisces as well. Saturn is going to get into Aries and it's going to stay there for about 2.5 years. Neptune in Aries. Okay, this Neptune is not going to be retrograding back into Pisces. This is going to stick around until 2039. We're in a new era here. We are in an era of individual idealism, like bold spirituality, individualistic movements, like people kind of self-discovering what it means to be spiritual and not following groups or gurus so much. Now, Saturn is sitting toward the tipping point of very late Pisces. Saturn has been moving through Pisces over the last couple of years. And if anyone has got planets in Pisces, Pisces rising, or Saturn in Pisces, which would have meant you've been going through your Saturn return, that is coming to a close within the next week or so, as Saturn is going to move out of Pisces and it's going to move into Neptune, right into Neptune, into Aries. Okay, so it's going to conjoin. It also means that if you've got any planets in early degrees of cardinal signs, I'm going to stop sharing now. If you've got any planets in the early degrees of cardinal signs, which is Aries, Capricorn, Cancer, or Libra, the Saturn Neptune conjunction is going to be pressing on your buttons. That means that you might notice a change in the way that you are relating to others. You might feel a bit more vague. You might feel a bit more, inspired. You might feel a little bit more like spiritual, magical. You might feel like going off on your own and doing something that is revolutionary because these planets are moving through Aries, remember. So this is going to be very much um, a potent moment where people might not necessarily be thinking things through. They might not be thinking things through to the end. They might just be like, this feels like the right thing to do. I'm inspired by an idea. I'm going to just go and do that thing. So use caution in this coming period, especially if this is pressing on your personal birth chart. So these things can be happening collectively, or they do happen in a broad sense of the chart in the here and now moment. But when that chart speaks to your natal birth chart and it makes aspects to your birth chart, then that's when you're kind of given a microphone and your life starts to play into that narrative even more personally. Now, of course, we're going to see this in terms of global politics. Neptune was in Aries back in 1862. That was when we had the period of the US Civil War. And we can see, unfortunately, the heating up of global politics. We can see the intensification of problems happening overseas right now. Now, as much as Neptune is unbounded and struggles with boundaries, we can also see that it's with Saturn. And Saturn is the planet of boundaries and control, but it's in Aries, which is the sign of its fall in astrology, which means that it is not comfortable hanging out in Aries. It means that Saturn really doesn't have the resources it needs to kind of contain and manage things like it likes to do. Okay, it's in a Mars ruled sign. And it's going to be in a Mars ruled sign for the next couple of years. And so that means that globally and personally, people need to start to practice their discipline. Okay, you need to figure out, how do I hold myself, even if I'm impatient, even if I lose my temper? How do I stop from lashing out? How do I keep a sense of what is real and what is not real? Because Neptune definitely clouds anything, any structures, or it can kind of lead to a bit of a dissolving of reality because it's with the planet of structures, Saturn, but it's the planet that tends to blur the boundaries. So when they are together, we've got to be careful that we're seeing things as they really are, and we're not getting stuck on an ideology. We're not fighting for something just for our ego. Okay, we need to make sure we are staying in a sense of maturity. And because Saturn's a planet of maturity, but it's in Aries. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. It is symbolic of that impulse to act, that spring impulse, like that first little shoot that pokes through as it's starting to become a tree. Okay. Saturn is generally connected to aging and things that have stood the test of time. But when Saturn goes into Aries, you've got to be mindful. Okay. It wants to develop something brand new. Now, this can be exciting, I guess, if we're willing to take the plunge on things that have been measured and that have been prepared rather than just impulsively acting. Now, if you've got your Saturn in Aries, that means you were born, about 29, 28 to 30 years ago. You've got Saturn in Aries, you're going to be moving through your Saturn return right now, depending on the degrees. But once Saturn enters into Aries, if you have got your Saturn in Aries, then you're going to start to feel that intensification. You're going to start to see and feel Saturn demanding that you start to gather things together and do the work. Now, for someone born with Saturn in Aries, maybe the work is a personal mission. Maybe there is a need to commit, but also to find the drive and the motivation. maybe there is a tendency to kind of try and put your foot on the accelerator and the brake at the same time. And there is a real need during this period. We've got Saturn, which is a cold, dry planet, in Aries, which is a hot, dry sign. So we've got to choose when to fight and we've got to choose when to recoil and plan in this next couple of year period. Now, this is all happening on the backdrop of another very important series of transits that are happening currently, right now. And this is going to be affecting people with fixed sign planets. Now, this is Aquarius, Leo, Scorpio, and Taurus. If you've got any of your planets in your astrological chart in those signs, especially at the moment in the early degrees of those signs, check your birth chart, then you are under intense pressure right now. There is a collective volcanic energy building. Mars has been moving through a big stellium in Capricorn. It has been pulling down structures. It has been pulling down old, tired, patriarchal, boys' clubs. It's been revealing, and as has Pluto in Aquarius, it's been revealing this sort of underworld perversion. Okay. Now, as Mars has just entered into Aquarius, and it will conjoin Pluto in the coming days, this is huge energy. This is the energy of empowerment. Okay, this is the most positive way of looking at it. Genuine empowerment and a mission to step into your humanity and to be the best version of yourself that you can be. It is a warning in the world. It is a warning because this energy is a warlike, unfortunately, it's a warlike combination of planets coming together. Okay. Mars is the planet of chaos. It's the planet of war. Okay. It's coming together with Pluto, which is the planet of the underworld. Okay. That malevolent energy, the energy of corruption, the energy of crime. Okay. Mars, Pluto, we've got to check our intentions. We've got to keep our eyes open. And if you have planets in the early degrees of fixed signs, this becomes a personal mission for you. And I would recommend to anyone who's feeling angry, anyone who feels the fire building, or anyone who's sensitive to the collective energies which are going on at the moment and they are building in heat. Now, remember, Aquarius might be an air sign, but it is a hot and wet sign. Okay, so there is heat around this conjunction. There is a building of the fight is like a intellectual ideological fight because it's in a sign of Aquarius. It's a fight of mindset. It's a fight of, I believe this, you believe this, so like let's fight about that. It's in Aquarius, okay? It's a fight for our humanity. It's a fight for our decency. It's a fight for the group, okay? But we've also got to remember that Saturn, Neptune are moving into Aries, which is also a volatile place because it's hot and dry. So there's a lot of additional heat, okay? These planets are moving out of cold, dry signs, okay? Mars has been going through Capricorn. There's been some containment because Mars has been in its sign of exaltation where, we'd like to think that Mars might behave itself or at least have a higher sense of making choices about when to kind of act and when to contain itself in a Saturn-ruled sign. Now, Mars going into Aquarius is still in a Saturn-ruled sign, but it is in a hotter place, and it will apply to Pluto. Okay. And I mean, we can see this with the intensification of politics right now. We can see this with the crisis happening in Iran. We can see this with the US challenges globally are really getting to that boiling point. Now, we haven't seen a conjunction between Mars and Pluto in Aquarius since 2024, and it's super rare. It's way rarer than that. That was the first one we've seen in like hundreds of years. Okay. But during that period, when Mars dipped itself into into Aquarius with Pluto, we saw an intensification in the Israel-Hamas war. We saw an intensification um, in the Russian-Ukraine crisis at that time. So we do have to be careful. We do have to send a lot of peace out, and we do need to kind of be moving towards, creating our own groups within our own societies that of like-minded people, and ways that we can care for each other that might be sort of outside of the structure of the old world. Okay, because we have moved out of Capricorn, which rules those four square walls. It rules the powers that be. It rules the 1%. It rules those old structures. Okay, we're in a new era now. Okay, we're in an era now. And so what really matters is the structures that we build online, the structures that we build in terms of managing our money in different ways. So this can talk about, perhaps dissolving of the banking system and moving into cryptocurrencies, moving into other ways of sharing information that we can see recently with some of these conflicts going on. We've seen the shutdown of communications. We've seen the internet be totally taken down in Iran for a couple of weeks, which is just crazy. But we can see that that's connected to this transit. So the crux of this is if you've got planets in fixed signs, even if they're not in the early degrees, you are still going to have Mars moving through your chart. Okay. It's either going to be conjoining it if it's in Aquarius, it's going to be opposing it if you have got a Leo planet. Okay. If you've got the sun, moon, ascendant, any of your planets in Leo, you're going to feel a sense of tension. There's something is going to need to change for you. Okay. You might feel frustrated, but this can be mobilized into action. That's the good thing about a transit of Mars. Mars Pluto together gives us this intense capacity to really use our energy and to really feel inspired. Okay. This is at the best possible usage of it, but it can lead to negative, negative use of energy for the wrong reason. So you've got to be careful of that. If you've got planets in Taurus or in Aquarius, then again, you're also going to see this Mars Pluto or feel it in your life, depending on where those are. Now, if you have Pisces stuff, you're going to get a rest, okay, because Saturn is moving out and Neptune is moving out. So you have been under a really difficult series of transits over the last couple of years with Saturn moving through your sign. Any other mutable people too, Sagittarians, um, people who've got planets in Virgo, or people who've got stuff in Gemini. You've also been getting the aspects of Saturn, which has potentially been impeding or restricting or making you grow up. Okay, maybe you have been tested and you've been asked to mature. You've been given tests over the last couple of years. Are you grown up yet, or are you going to make the same mistakes again and again? Because Saturn punishes those errors in an effort to help you grow and mature and become a leader and become an adult. Now, it hasn't been easy in this recent period because Saturn has been tightly bound to Neptune. And so maybe for some of you who've got those mutable sign placements in your chart, you've been trying to make improvements, you've been trying to have boundaries, but it seems like everything is just too confusing and too difficult to hold on to. Saturn, Neptune, dissolving the structures of our life. Okay, so the good news is for people with mutable sign placements, especially in the late degrees, you're going to get a break from that energy. The challenging thing is people with planets in early degrees of cardinal signs, like I said before, Aries, Libra, Capricorn, Cancer, you are going to be experiencing that additional pressure, that additional challenge from Saturn to do something new, to grow up, to stand up. It's got a little bit more fire in it, but there's also going to be that risk of, you know, getting maybe a little bit distracted. Neptune's there, okay? A little bit of confusion about what it is you should be doing. So just be mindful of that to find a happy medium. You know, some things are worth fighting for, some things are worth putting in the additional effort. There is more of an energy of really tuning into yourself as an individual with this energy because it's in Aries, trying something new, setting a ball rolling, but still being mindful of the impact that that has on other people, especially in the next month because the energies are hot. They're volcanic. There is a lack of patience. There is there is a lot of uh, destabilization going on in the world. So let me just share the chart with you again, just to give you a final look at what we're doing and what's going on for us. So this is happening. This is happening. This conjunction is happening on Valentine's Day, pretty much between Saturn, Neptune, and Aries, beginning a new cycle in Aries. Okay, this is significant. And at the same time, we can see that Mars is going to be coming quite close to the sun, but it has already separated from Pluto. So the volcanic energies I spoke about are actually more prevalent and more likely to be felt in this period now. Okay. So as Neptune steps into Aries, the sign of the warrior, the gladiator, the kind of fighting for an ideology, fighting for a dream. Okay, there's this real sort of dreamlike energy to why we would initiate a project. So, I mean, in a positive sense, it's like stepping into what it is that you're dreaming, but making sure that your dream is actually something that's going to serve rather than something that's only going to serve you. Okay, so serving the world, not just yourself. Because that's needed. We've got a huge stellium, which is a grouping of planets in Aquarius, which talks about the collective. It talks about humanity as a whole. And we're in a revolution of humanity. We've got planets having revolutions, and we can see that historically, when we've seen these connections, um, we've had revolutions. So the last Mars Pluto conjunction in early Aquarius was back in 1530s. And what we saw then was a very significant change in British Parliament. So we saw, or the British political system. So we saw King Henry um, and the English Reformation, which is he pretty much broke away from the Catholic Church and established the Church of England, which really permanently changed um, that religious structure. Okay, so we're going to see a change broadly in religious and governmental structures. Okay, we're seeing changes in politics, and there's a real significant reshaping of the power dynamics. Now, Mars Pluto is all about power dynamics. Okay, it's about learning to control your own personal power. It's about understanding that those structures are changing globally now. And unfortunately, there are sometimes conflict, or there has been historically conflicts around these periods of time. So the good news about Mars Pluto, though, is it's not going to be anywhere near as long a transit as Neptune or Saturn through Aries. But the coming together of these at the same time Neptune steps in really does highlight the theme of this next cycle that we're going to be going through until 2039, because Neptune is in Aries and Aries is ruled by Mars, who's in Aquarius with Pluto. So this is really saying, yes, this is potentially a period of instability and chaos, but also a period of self-empowerment and trying to come together as a collective, as a group for the betterment of society and the individual as well. So, yeah, just hold on to your hats. Keep a look at, um, I guess, keep a look at current global events, but also make sure you look after your own mental health because it can be quite stressful. Now, there is going to be another significant event happening on the 2nd of February. We can see that we're going to be in a full moon phase. I'm just going to move this back a little bit so it's quite close to exact. Okay. It's going to be happening in the early hours of the 2nd of Feb. As a bit of a ballpark, I'm quite fastidious about these, but listen, let's not get too caught up on it. I just want to get you to 12 degrees of Leo. So we're having a full moon in Leo. And that's happening here, um, yeah, in the early hours of the second. Now, this is going to be highlighting everything going on here in Aquarius, okay, because Leo's over here. It's going to be kind of a, it's going to be highlighting a sense of struggle between the personal and the collective. Remember, Leo is about um, the individual, it's about shining, okay? And Aquarius is, and it's under the rulership of the sun, okay? So it's got that sort of potent sense of individuality and self. Whereas Aquarius is ruled by Saturn and it's opposite. Okay, so there is sort of like um, a highlighting of what it is you need to do for yourself, even though, there could be chaos or changes in the world as we know it. There's also a real need to be able to find your own way to shine, your own way to express yourself amongst all of this. Now it's happening in an opposition to Mars Pluto, slightly wide, but still happening. And so there is going to be the potential for conflict during this period. So let me have a look. Yeah, it's happening within 5 degrees of an opposition to Mars. So this could also just suggest that there might be some new rules coming out in terms of things that we're expected to do in society. But there might be opposition to that because full moons are always oppositions. They're always highlighting a particular axis in the chart. Okay, so this is the Leo Aquarius axis. Okay, this is the chart of, the person who is an individual self. Okay, this is about the way you want to create your life as opposed to the way that society says we need to be um, functioning together as a group. So it's about finding a happy place between you and the society you're living in. And when society feels crazy, which is kind of what this collection of planets in Aquarius, or at least under huge transformation right now, because that's what Pluto is all about, and Mars coming up to Pluto. These historical times when we've seen these repeating themes is that one structure or one system has been completely deconstructed and then something new has come out of it. Now, some of these periods have been really interesting, especially these Pluto and Aquarius periods. We've seen some really interesting changes in terms of scientific developments. We're definitely going to see more of that coming through. We're going to see more changes, especially in relationship to our online presence, AI. Even we've got to be mindful of internet fraud, okay? Because remember, Pluto's can be connected to crime. And so this period could be an intensification of these things. So make sure you're protecting yourself, protecting your passwords, protecting your online identity. Things like identity fraud and stuff could also be growing in this period. But on a positive note, this is a really powerful time to step in and step up in your communities and to find kind of measured ways. Because remember, Aquarius is actually the sign of someone pouring the waters of reason. It's an air sign, but it's pouring reason down onto humanity. So we need to sort of remember that it's not about losing our faculties here and fighting for no reason or fighting for an ideology that doesn't serve the people. Okay, everything needs to be in that reference. Okay, so keeping it reasonable and choosing your battles wisely. And not just getting stuck, especially with this Saturn Neptune conjunction in Aries, not just getting stuck on the individual um, not just on the individual mission, finding that balance. Okay, so I hope you going well, and I hope if you have any of this really pressing on your chart that you take enough time to just rest and come back into yourself and maybe do some breath work. I find that's really helpful especially with anything to do with air signs, and we've got a lot of air signs at the moment. Everything's moving through Aquarius now. So some grounding breath is always good for that. With Aries, I think, especially with Saturn moving through Aries, Mars moving through Aquarius with Pluto, hardcore exercise or moving the body in ways that, is really sort of can be quite challenging. So maybe that means lifting weights, maybe it means running up a steep hill, is a way to start to discharge some of this energy because this energy is potent at the moment. If you're starting to notice that you're getting any signs of heat on your skin, like rashes, or you're noticing that you're feeling anxious, you might be noticing sort of that increase of heat in the body. So that could be a good idea to sort of start looking at supplements like spirulina or chlorella that are cooling, that are nourishing, that have got good proteins that help to rebuild the body, but also to help bring down some of the fire that is building at the moment.